So it's 6 o'clock in Sweden, and I know it's 11 a.m. in Nashville. Welcome, Christin Baker.
Thank you.
Today's WIFTI Worldwide webinar. And for those of you who are attending this webinar, we have had a series of WIFTI Worldwide webinar from all over the world since COVID started. And today we are happy to have our guests that belong to Nashville and Los Angeles.
Yes.
Those who don't know about WIFT, we started in Los Angeles 1973 as a reaction on the male dominance in the industry, and we are still there. Today we exist on 6 continents, and I am pleased to be the president since 2018. Today's moderator, Regina Mosch, who is responsible for communication and membership of WIFTI, unfortunately had to postpone in the last minute. So I will stay on as the moderator, which I'm very pleased for. I'm so happy and proud to have you here, Christin. So, and welcome all attendees. We will have questions for Q&A with Christin the last 20-30 minutes. So if you have questions for Christin, please write them in the Q&A box. And it would also be very interesting if you could write who you are and where you're from in the chat window. It's interesting for us to know who's here. So my first question to you, Christin, your background. Tell us a bit about the beginnings of your career and how did it feel when you started off in the industry?
So I don't always go back to my early 20s, but for the purposes of the webinar today, I will, because that's actually when I got my first, that's when I moved to LA. So I graduated from school. I went to Middle Tennessee State University, and I worked in Nashville as a PA. I did a couple of music videos and an indie movie. And then I moved to Los Angeles, and sort of where I was able to get a job at Regency Productions in the story department. And the cool thing about Regency was it was what they called a mini studio. So it could greenlight its own films. And the story department was really the heart.
Which year are we now, just so we know where in time we are?
98, 99, okay. Somewhere in there.
Thank you.
Yeah, and yeah, so, and the story department at a major studio is in charge of receiving all the scripts and sending them out for coverage. So I was able to get a real understanding of how sort of the heartbeat, how the scripts flowed into a studio, how all that worked, how coverage worked. I did coverage myself. So I just was surrounded by all these amazing stories that came in. I could read coverage, I could read scripts. So it gave me a really wonderful foundation of the industry, which was fantastic. And then from there, I got a job at the Writers Guild. And I worked in the membership department. And so I got an understanding of how Writers Guild membership worked and what made someone a member. And then I got to work in the TV credits department. And in there, I was able to understand how important credits are and the different nuances of credits. So our job was to make sure that the appropriate writers who wrote what was finally on screen received the on-screen writing credit. So I was involved in arbitrations with all these writers where they had to send in their copies and their versions. And so I learned a ton about how important credits are and how many people actually, how many different writers touch a script. And then I, you know, in that I did a lot of little indie short films and a documentary. I actually went to Albania during the war in Kosovo in '99 and did a documentary where I followed a guy, it's called Mr. Karaoke in Albania, who did karaoke in the refugee camps. And so I worked on a lot of little, you know, projects. And then I left the industry for about 9 years and went into nonprofit work and just sort of got a little burned out. But I just, I can't let go of, I can't quit storytelling ever. So in 2007, I started to get back into really wanting to tell stories. And that's when YouTube really started to become a thing. And then I realized there wasn't a space for queer female stories, that they were really, YouTube wasn't a great place for it. And as people were starting to do content, I thought, I think there's a space for this. And so in 2007, I started Tello Films. And then we really focused on having a platform for queer women to tell their stories. And then in 2009, and it was free, it was open and free, and we thought we'd make ad revenue money, which is never the case. And then we decided that we needed to become subscription based. So in 2009, right around the time Netflix was releasing House of Cards and Hulu was making their content, putting up what we at the time we called it a paywall, but they were really turning it into a subscription base, is when Tello launched. So we're really one of the oldest streaming services out there.
And that's amazing. So you actually started with the streaming service before Netflix.
It was a little more like YouTube, but yeah.
But in a way, imagining, I think this is so strange because now it's 11 years or 12 years later. And do we remember life before streaming? Isn't it strange? Because
I know.
they have not been there so long.
It's true. It's true.
And you were really a pioneer. So what was your vision with Tello Films? What if you looked into the future there in 28, what did you wish for or see or imagine for the future?
I really wanted to become as big as Netflix and as big as Hulu, and to be able to tell stories for my community. I knew early on that original content was going to be the key. And I think that's the thing that everyone else is now kind of figuring out and realizing.
How did you know that, I wonder? How could you be so sure?
Because, well, I knew that if you could get something on 5 different platforms, why would you give money to me? Like if it can be cheaper and you have more things that you can view, why are you coming? What would make someone come to Tello? And I thought, well, if we have original content that you could only get on Tello, then we have something that we can, that's a value proposition. So we can say, that's great if you want to go to Netflix and Amazon, but right now you can go on 5 different platforms and watch, the same movie. And then you're going to surf around for what is the best price point. And you're going to go to one and then drop out, and then go to another and then drop out. So in order to really make sure people stuck and our site was sticky, I went with original content. Now, my mistake was that I only did original content. It wasn't until 2018 that I opened up the site to non-exclusive. And so now we have.
Why was it a mistake?
Because it really limited how much content we could have on the site. So, if we want to become, the premier place for you, we need to have where you can find everything, or almost everything. So, and I met with a friend who was like, this is amazing, but you need to be non-exclusive. And I was like, you know what, you're right. And so that's when we started licensing other content.
No. So how did you find the projects in the beginning that ended up on Tello? How did they come to you, or did you did you get out and curate them, or how did you?
Yeah, so at first I had just a group of writers, and we only had enough money to do a couple of little web series a year. So, so it was simple to I would write the script and then I would give it to my producing partner, and they would read it and rewrite it. And so we really just were our own little, and then occasionally we would.
Sorry for interrupting, but
yeah, that's okay.
In the beginning was a one-stop shop where you did it all from the beginning to the audience, and so you control the whole chain actually. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And how did you find the audience?
We found, so we couldn't really afford to do heavy marketing. So what we realized was reviews. If we could get a lesbian or queer female, LGBTQ female site to review our products, that really helped. So we had to figure, and we couldn't really afford a publicist. So we really had to work a lot on social media. So it was a lot of Twitter, a lot of Facebook, and Instagram when we first started was not around. So it was Twitter and Facebook at first.
Looking back, was that good or bad that you couldn't afford a publicist? Was it good that you really had to invent the wheel in a way, or was it just painful?
I mean, you know, I would love to like be like, no, it was great, but no, I would if we could have afforded a
Yeah.
publicist, because you know, I did Tello as a side gig for the first 10 years that we were around, and
Yeah.
so I had a full-time job, and you know, it was, you know, I mean, I'm very lucky to have an amazing publicist now, so at least I can now look back and be very grateful for everything that I have when we were so scrappy in the beginning.
But I appreciate that you didn't say yes, actually, I must say, because sometimes we have this romantic dream that if we just in the fight, because I hear an activist in between this, that you,
Yes.
Yeah. So what made you an activist?
You know, I think it was my own hunger for content. I think I was just so bummed that my community had to sort of be relegated to scraps whenever someone decided to like maybe create a lesbian project or give money to it, or you know, I think I really wanted to empower myself and empower others to be able to tell our stories and not have to conform.
What difference do you think it make? And maybe this is a really stupid question, you have to excuse me, but what difference does it make to the society when the queer content reach a broader audience? What will it give to the big group to see?
So well, so I think it does a couple of things. Number one, I think the more other people can see how normal our stories are and see the stories of people who aren't like them in mainstream, I think it's very helpful. I think as you know, I think Ellen and Rosie, after Rosie came out, were super helpful for moving people into recognizing that we were just like everyone else. I think it can normalize something that seems very foreign. So I think for our straight friends, for those who are heteronormative, it's really good to see stories that you don't experience, but how you have those things in common. We all want to love, we all have family problems, we all have, right? So it does that. I think for my community, and this is where my activism comes from, I truly believe that making content that is reflected back to you saves lives.
Yeah.
I think that when you look and scan the landscape for media and you don't see yourself reflected, you feel like your story is unique. There's no one out there like you, and that something is wrong with you. Yeah. The more you can see your story reflected, the more you realize you're part of a community. Yeah. And I truly believe that it when I'm, you know, making a cheesy holiday rom-com, I truly believe that is showing someone out there that they are worthy of love, just like all the other cheesy holiday straight people are.
I just wanted it to be quiet for a while because I really like what you said. Sometimes silence also speaks. Yeah, thank you very much. I have Regina's prepared questions here, so let me have a look. Do you have a specific team of above and below the line people that you bring back for every project, or do you look at each film differently?
I do have, I try to cast it. I try not to use the exact same actors in everyone, because I enjoy working with other people, but there you will see very much people who you've seen in other projects in mine. But yes, as an indie filmmaker, I am asking amazing artists to take a significant cut in pay. And in order to do that, they need to be my friends. So I do try and use the same crew over and over again, both in, I have folks in LA that I love, and I have folks in Nashville that I love. If they're not available, I completely understand. But the good news is I run a really good set. I keep a 12-hour day. I treat people with respect and dignity. We try and have as much fun as possible. And I'm lucky that people, for my very low rate, and we don't go super long. So like my longest shoot was 14 days. So I'm lucky that I have people who choose to come back over and over again, even for the low rate, because they love the people that they get to work with. They enjoy our content, and they like working with me. Mm-hmm. So Yes, I hope one day to have like large enough budgets to pay them more closer to what they're worth, but until then, I'm very lucky to make art with some amazing people.
So streaming service, it's indie, focusing on queer content and coming out of Nashville. I'm sorry, but I have some prejudice, and I'm happy to change my mind, but isn't that a bit unexpected?
Yeah, well, you know, we started in Chicago. So we were founded in Chicago, and then I personally moved back to Nashville. So that's why we've done a lot of productions out of Nashville, because I'm here, and we've done a lot of productions out of LA because I live there as well. But you know, Nashville is a surprisingly welcoming city for. That's
what I wanted to hear, because I love
LGBTQ
my
community.
Prejudices are wrong, because I think that's something we all have to learn. We have ideas about things, and the south of US, my prejudice said that is more misogynic, but if it's not, it's fantastic.
Yes, yeah, I'm very lucky to live in an area that's very, very welcoming and open.
Yeah, I have the pleasure to be in my WIFTI duties a couple of times in Nashville. I have enjoyed it so much, and I'm very proud of both WIFT Nashville and WIFT Tennessee.
It's a wonderful organization.
Yeah. So stories, what stories within your genre do you feel compelled to write, produce, and why? So what kind of stories is your?
Sure. So we have really focused in the last couple of years on holiday rom-coms for queer women, and there's a couple of reasons. I think first of all, everyone in the United States, at least, so speaking from the US, like, we love a good holiday cheesy rom-com. Like, it's just
because the whole world just
the whole world. Okay, good. I didn't want to make an assumption, but there's just something that's so wonderfully predictable, and I think sometimes that's actually a very nice thing to have. So what happened was, we did not have that kind of story being told for our community, and we want to be seen in the cheesy holiday rom-coms just like anyone else. So in 2019 we came out with our first and it's actually the first feature-length queer lady holiday rom-com ever released, called Season of Love. And then the next year we followed that up. In 2020 we released I Hate New Year's, and then this coming season we will be releasing another one that we shot this past February called Christmas at the Ranch. And I think there's a couple of things that are important. Number one, it's modern day, which Hollywood really has started to love the lesbian period piece. So that's very important to us, is that it's you know, modern day. The ladies end up together in the end, which also doesn't always happen in Hollywood, and especially some of the period pieces. And again, 3, it's just this lovely feel good. You don't have to think too hard. You just sort of sit back and enjoy the amazing acting up on screen. So that's what we've been focused on. We're starting to move into the horror genre, and so we're starting to look into that a little bit. But I think we really want to put our stake in the ground for the LGBTQ female holiday rom-com.
Yeah. Maybe not as stupid, but I was talking to someone else in the queer community, and I also think you said it in the beginning, that to show the world that queer people are just normal people with feelings, wants love, etc. But what about stories where you don't problematize sexuality? You're just are normal people who do normal things, even if you're queer. What you understand my question?
Are you asking about like a coming out kind of story, or?
Do we have a coming out part, or do we have it's a problem, or can it just be a life?
So that's what. So in our past, they were all coming out stories. If you look at all of the early sort of like lesbian films, it was always about the coming out struggle. And I think that is an absolute very real struggle.
Of course.
And it will always, you know, probably be part of someone's journey. But I really felt like someone else has told that story. You can go see those in a ton of other movies. And I wanted to show there's no coming out in this. No. It's just women who, because while I sometimes need to proclaim my lesbianism to someone or tell them that I don't have a husband or a boyfriend, but I have a girlfriend or whatever,
Yeah.
you're not constantly in this state of coming out. Sometimes you just sort of live your life and you eat breakfast and you go to weddings and so yeah, we wanted it to sort of just be that they're gay and there's no big deal about that.
Have you seen, what about the audience reactions to these kind of stories? Do you have anything to say about that?
It's been so amazing, especially when Season of Love came out and it was the first one. We had a bunch of people emailing us and actually tweeting to us and saying, I finally get to sit down with my parents and watch a movie that I'm reflected in, and thank you so much for that. And lots of stories about that and people just seeing themselves reflected in a cheesy holiday rom-com. Like, just so many people are like, I love this genre. Thank you for showing our story in there.
In this journey you have made since 28, we can say, is there anything you regret that you would have done different, or are you just happy and proud for everything?
Yeah, I mean, I think I really try. I think the best thing to do is I don't think I regret. I think I've learned from a lot of things, so I don't regret those, because I've become a better filmmaker. I've become a better storyteller and hopefully a better person because of the choices that I've made and the ways I've had to pivot. So I don't regret anything. I think if anything, I've very much learned from it. I do regret one thing, and that is early on, I went with PayPal. See, we started this before anyone. Now you have code. If you want to start an SVOD, Helene, you can do it like that. You have to pay a little money, but we had to create the wheel. And early on, we did use PayPal as our payment processor. When we switched to a different one, PayPal doesn't move, like all the other like transaction folks will move your subscribers. PayPal would not. And so we lost all of our subscribers and had to start all over again in 2015. That was a kick in the teeth. And so I wish I had used a different, but that was one of the very few that were out there when we started way back in 09. So there weren't a ton of choices. And then, so that was the one thing that just killed me.
Of course, it's a pity, but it's a technical thing. So I hear that you, from the, so to say, the big bow of your arc of your story, it works. So yeah, I go down in my questions again. 12 years of Tello is a significant history. That's so funny, because this question is exactly the question I just asked you. I'm
sure you're just like, you and Regina are on the same page.
Yeah, I think so. We've been together. What would be one thing you would do differently? Now, was it more difficult starting out or keeping going? That's a very good question, I think.
You know, I will say it's been, starting out's easy because you're full of potential and you're full of possibility and you're full of the dream of reaching for the stars and like, oh, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this. So starting out, in my mind, there's so much excitement around it because it's something you're doing that's new. Keeping going, I mean, there were times when, you know, our numbers weren't growing or were shrinking, and I couldn't get this publication to cover us, and I didn't know why. It seemed like no one wanted to pay attention to the work that we were doing, and you felt like you were screaming into a void. So I think keeping going can be so difficult because, you know, it doesn't work out the way you always want it to, and you know, you feel like you're running through mud, and you just want to go, what am I doing? And especially for me, because it was a part-time gig, you know, it wasn't like it was so, and actually that's probably what helped me, you know, keep going, was that it was something I was doing for, because it was my passion. So keeping going can be really, really tough because it gets, you know, it's like when it gets hard, you have to have that resiliency that pushes you through it.
Definitely. Were there any times you said, no, I quit, I stopped now, I had enough? Has there been those moments where you?
There was one time where I was riding on a bus in Chicago to work because I took public transportation, and I really had that thought. And I for about 15 minutes.
Okay, 15
I was
minutes.
gonna quit. 15 minutes I was gonna quit, and then I was like, well, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Like, this is what you love. And then I had a conversation with myself, and I was like, okay.
Yeah. So what
I kept going.
made you take the decision to stay?
You know, when you don't really have like a plan B, I think I wake up every morning, Helene, and I can't think about anything else but telling stories and making movies. And when you realize that you can't do anything, like I can't do anything. If I quit, the next day I would have started all over again. You know, I would have said, what am I doing? I have to do this. This is in my soul.
Since I started as the WIFTI president, I also work as a coach. So I work worldwide, and I know right now that filmmakers, like you describe yourself, I know that filmmakers are the same all over the world. And I think I look at us as a tribe. And it gives me so much comfort to think of all these people who do this, even if it's impossible, because it is impossible. Yeah. You know,
it is.
You have to overcome so much to be in this business, and you continue. Yeah. And I think that is so beautiful in a way. And thinking of that, Tello, you have an American audience, but what about the rest of the world? Because WIFTI is an international organization. So how is your outreach?
We have, I think about 30% of our subscribers are international.
Yeah.
And we try and get as many of our projects translated into or captioned as possible. Yeah. Sometimes the filmmakers don't provide that for us. Yeah. All of our movies that we release, all are captioned in various languages. Yeah. And so we do international, we promote internationally. Yeah. So we are, and we can geo-block. So we're able to, so we're able to do. So
for me, as I'm in Sweden, so it's possible for me to attend Tello and to sign up. Yeah, and I haven't opened it up for a question yet, Nan, but because it's Nan, Germany is your international audience, because I was curious about that too. Where in the world? And of course, WIFTI can help to reach out. We have a huge network. So where in the world is your international audience outside the US?
Mostly European countries.
Yeah.
So we're mostly in Europe. I mean, obviously North America is big, Australia, and
territories,
Yep.
And of course in Europe, and you should also have African countries. There's a lot of English speaking countries there as well, I think.
Yeah. There are, I think, you know, we do have sometimes a barrier to price point. In some of the other countries, so you know, because of the exchange rate and things like that it can be cost prohibitive for a lot of our friends in some of the other countries. So
I understand that. So actually, for you who are listening, please, I see that I have some questions in the chat field, but I really prefer if you write them in the Q&A box. So please write your question, because I will soon open up, but I still have some questions on my own. You have crowdfunded many of your projects. Can you tell us a bit about and why and how, and maybe some golden tips about crowdfunding?
Yes, I'm very passionate. So we did crowdfunding very, very early, and for all of our movies we you know, out of necessity we've needed to do crowdfunding. And so we have been relatively successful in that area in order to make up. So we do have investors for our movies, but we do need to supplement some of it through crowdfunding. So we're able to pre-sell a digital download behind the scenes. You know, people love different digital perks and things like that. So, and I also think it's a really wonderful way of marketing. So for our movie, Season of Love, when we crowdfunded for it, we had over 500 people who gave to the site, to the campaign, which to me means, well, there's 500 passionate people who are gonna then go out and spread the news
talk
when
to
it's
their
released.
friends, and yeah, so it's audience
Exactly.
engagement and outreach. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. It's wonderful engagement and outreach, and just to get people excited about what you're talking about. So there's really 3 phases when you do it. So you do the crowdfunding.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do it before you shoot the movie, sometimes after. So that just depends. But that's getting the word out. Then you have, when you give perks away. And so that's a whole other way of reminding people that they donated to this film and to get them excited about it. And then you have when the film comes out itself and you're able to send them the digital download.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful way of marketing. Now, what you have to make sure is I've built up my crowdfunding audience over years. I mean, I've been doing this for 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm able to, so you have to know that you're starting off and you're going to really rely on friends and family and friends of friends to get the word out. But as you build your network, as you build your fan base, as you build your audience and people who are passionate about your filmmaking, you're able to grow that each time. So
instead of doing, you have your pre-production, you have your production, development, production, post-production. I hear that you also start with the distribution already when you finance. So you have this, that you use the different steps
right.
to make each other stronger in a way, which is really, it's more a circular.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting from thinking about the future, new economies that should be more circular. So
yeah.
And of course independence. So but if you should give 3 good advices about
so here's what I will say. And I'm in the middle of doing perk fulfillment. So here are my envelopes. What else I do? But something that's really great to send is a signed script cover page. So this is a script cover page from Christmas at the Ranch, and it's signed by Lindsay, Wagner, Laura Allen, myself, and Amanda Righetti, who are 3 main stars, and then me. These are great because they're flat and they're inexpensive to mail. They just fit into a regular envelope, and those are relatively inexpensive. So anytime you can send, so I would think, number 1, think about the perks that you do. We also gave away a hat like this. No, but these are expensive to ship. So you have to make sure the price point of it is going to be helpful. And then I just packed up my beanies, but beanies are really good. People love beanies, and they slide into an envelope. So think about your perks and what you have to mail. I highly suggest not doing t-shirts, because then you have to worry about what's the cut. Is it a men's cut? Is it a women's cut? Is it a unisex cut? What size?
Yes.
Then you have to ask everyone for their size. And then you're dealing with, okay, here are all my smalls. I need to make sure so-and-so got a small and it goes in the right thing. And I always say, stay away from t-shirts if you can. Digital perks are great. A voicemail, you can send a recording to someone from a cast member. You can send a video message. You can give away producer credits for a very high price point. So I would say be aware of perks and what you're going to have to fulfill when you're done. The second thing is what you need to make your project should not be your goal. You really want to look at how much do I think I can raise. You might need $100,000, but you might only be able to raise 20. So your goal should be 20, not 100. So that's the second thing, is be aware of what your goal is and what you think you're able to raise. The third thing, and this is the thing that a lot of people don't understand, and it's counterintuitive. So some people think, well, once I hit my goal, no one's going to want to give, which it's the exact opposite. People love giving to something that they see as successful.
Yeah.
So once you hit your goal,
it's in the Bible. It's if someone have, you give to those who have already, isn't it? Isn't it strange?
I mean, it's biblical, right?
Yeah.
So, but a lot of people think, oh, I need to set my goal a little high so that I can, but that is not. So I'll give a great example. I just crowdfunded for Christmas at the Ranch, which is what I am fulfilling right now. My goal was 17,500. And I purposefully, I thought I could raise more, but I purposefully put it low because it's a very stressful thing. And I was dealing with a lot of stuff. So I was like, well, I hit that in 12 hours.
Wow. Wow.
So I needed to have a second goal, like already in mind, and what that goal would help me do. So I thought, well, oh my gosh, what's going to be my second goal? So my second goal, I wanted to do a soundtrack, but that's also very expensive.
Yeah.
So I think I put the goal at like 50,000 or something like that was the new stretch goal for a soundtrack. And I hit that. And I think I ended up raising like $62,000, which is amazing.
It's
So,
fantastic. Yeah.
so it just shows you that people want to give to something that they see as successful, something that they're passionate about, and you have to let them know what it's going to do. So now I'm able to work with some amazing musicians and have a soundtrack that's pre-sold, but that also is going to be able to be available to those when we're done.
Yeah. So where is Christmas at the Ranch set? In Nashville or?
Yep, outside of Nashville, we had I briefly, we don't have it anymore, but I bought a ranch with some investors out here as a production studio. And so we filmed it out at that ranch, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's going to be, I'm looking at stuff now.
Could you pitch a bit of Christmas at the Ranch? Because I see we have some questions. Could you just?
Sure. So yeah, so Christmas at the Ranch, it's about, our lead character's name is Haley, and she lives in the big city and works for as like a chief marketing officer for an energy drink. But her family's home, because they've made some bad financial decisions, is going to be, they're going to have to sell it. And so they call her to come home, and her Meemaw is there, and her brother Charles, and the ranch hand Kate. So she flies home to see if she can help save the ranch from being put out of business. And they have a Christmas hayride and like horses and cows. And so she comes home and of course falls in love with ranch hand Kate.
Okay, and then the love story, please.
Yeah, so at first Haley and Kate meet and they do not like each other.
No.
And then
in a way we knew that, but we want to hear you say it.
Of course, they don't like each other at all. Because Kate thinks that Haley doesn't love the ranch, and Haley is jealous of Kate's relationship with her brother and Meemaw. And so they don't like each other, but then of course they have to spend more time together. And as they get to know each other, they end up falling in love.
Then we have to sign up and see the film. Thank you.
That's right. That's right. Sign up for the great music.
Yeah. So I should let people in because I think we have such a nice time. So I open up the Q&A window. So let's see.
All right.
What do I got? There are more mainstream films with lesbian stories. La jeune fille, I don't speak French, so that's Ammonite, or even more mainstream like Happy Season. Is it making it more difficult for indie honest movies? That's interesting. When you have mainstream, is it more difficult for indie movies when you have mainstream lesbian movies?
So it doesn't. That's a great question. It doesn't. So first of all, when I look at the landscape, the only way it could hurt is if those movies don't perform well. So if a Hollywood movie comes out that has a lesbian or queer female storyline, if they don't perform well, then it hurts us because we have to pull comps. So if I can't pull a comp of a successful film, that does hurt me with investors because there's nothing to point to that says, look at how well this did, there's an audience for it. So it's not necessarily about how many lesbian movies are coming out or queer lesbian movies are coming out. It's did they perform well? Okay. So if something like Ammonite can show really good numbers, I think, Happiest Season, it was Hulu's most watched movie there for a little while. That's all very good for me because it just shows there's an audience for our stories.
Yeah. That was Elisa Mariani who asked that question, by the way. Now we have Dallas Aita. If you were to encourage someone to want to create, where would you tell them to start? I was laughing because it said from the beginning in my mind, but I was not the one who should answer. It's you. So where would you tell them to start?
I mean, create is such a, that's such a broad word, isn't it? So if you're a writer, I would say you better start writing.
Yeah. And
you better start looking. I always tell writers, watch movies that you love and then go find the script and read it.
May I try? May I try? Sorry for I interrupt all the time. I'm very sorry.
That's okay, Helene. Go ahead.
I try to. No, but when I work as a coach, I was in Iceland once, and I met a girl. I came into the room, and then I said hello to the girls. It was young girls, And then she said, what's your name? My name was, I think her name was Christine actually. And then she said, oh, who are you? What are you doing? I said, I want to be a scriptwriter, she said.
Oh,
and then
yeah.
I just got this, but you can't say like that. That's because if you want to be scriptwriter, you have to say you're a scriptwriter because no one else will give you the space.
Right,
So
right.
could it be an answer that give yourself the space to be what you want?
I think, yeah, I mean, obviously you need to see yourself as what it is first. But you know, I would say the more I would also say the more you're around creative people, the more you're also inspired and empowered. So in whatever area you are, wherever you are in the world, find community on social media, find community in your local space, start being around people who are making the things that you want to make, so that you can create a network. And then, so if you want to be a screenwriter, you know who you can reach out to. If you want to direct, you know who you can reach out to. So the more you can surround yourself with people doing what it is that you want to do, I think the better. And I also would suggest, if you can, find a mentor, reach out to someone that you admire, even if they're far away or close, and find someone who can mentor you. I think that's, and you know, WIFTI is a wonderful organization to be involved with for mentorship. Yeah. So I think as much as you can surround yourself with the people doing that you want to do, that it will inspire you, and it will just create that energy in your life.
Thank you very much, Christine. And to fill in, I think right now what we have learned from COVID, that the network can also be built digitally. So you really can reach out all over the world. That's
absolutely
what we learned during this.
I have people reaching out to me on Facebook. What are your suggestions? What should I do? And I will do my best to always answer them.
Thank you, Christine. Great. So Noelle DeAtley, actor, producer, Charlotte, North Carolina. Great seeing you again and seeing your continued success.
Thank you.
How do you keep in touch with your network?
Oh gosh, so I'm not great on social media. I will say that. I have someone who does Tello social. I'm not on it probably often enough. That's all, and that's not a great thing to do. So I'm not great on social, but my network, I like phone calls. I'm an old school person, so I will call people and check in. I also text if I have their number. I check in with my actors a ton. If someone pops into my head, I will immediately sit down and send them a text, because I feel like there's a reason they popped into my head. And I actually had one of my actors say to me one time that she said, it's really weird. Whenever I get a text from you, it's usually at a time when I like need a pick me up, or I'm like not feeling great, or something's going on. And I was like, that's really interesting, because I text you when it pops in. Not all the time, but I think it's important to just send someone a quick message. Hey, I'm thinking of you. I hope you're doing well. And then making sure that you just, keep them in mind when you're sending out emails or communicating in some way. So that's what I do. I tend to, and then I'll call.
That's what I hear. I think this is the third answer you gave, that all the time goes back to this importance of taking care of your community and the value of being part of a community. You're coming back to that all the time.
Absolutely.
So yeah. Then we have a question from Erin Kenway. I've been fortunate enough to self-fund and raise supplemental funding for my first 2 documentaries. I'm now in development on a few new projects with higher budgets and will require that I get external funding. I'm afraid I can't keep asking friends, family anymore. What's the first step? Do I set up meetings with a certain investment companies to see if they'll invest in a specific film, or my production company? Do I cold call EPs in Hollywood? Very good question, I think.
That's a really good question. So first, I just want to say congratulations for self-funding your projects. I think that's huge. So I would say what I did was, in 2018, I wanted to make a feature and I needed a bigger budget. And so I put the intention, I thought, there are a ton of mediocre white men that have done this before. And if they can do it, I can do it. So I think first you have to set your intention in knowing that this is something that you can do. and that people that are not as smart as you have done it, and you can do it. So that's the first thing that I sort of just had this mentality of like, I can do this. Second, the fact that you've done films before and have been able to self-fund, and I'm assuming stay in budget, is so important that you point that out. The third thing was I found 2 mentors who mentored me into understanding how to raise funds. And is she from the States, Helene?
Yes, I think so.
I think she's from the US, right?
I don't think anyone outside the States would ask, do I call EPs?
That's true, EPs, that's true. Okay, so let me see. So I created this like really, I had someone help me create a PowerPoint. I understood the nuances of getting investor funding and really focused in on, you know, kind of being prepared. And so I would say have, you know, if you can find a mentor who's done, it sounds like you're a documentary filmmaker. I think there's potentially a special nuance around documentary films. So find someone who can mentor you around documentary film financing. And as soon as I had this intention, it was amazing how many people just sort of happened into my life who could help me with this. So as soon as you really sort of start setting that intention and taking action, you will find that people will present themselves. The third thing that I did where I found my initial investors, I actually did 2 things. I went to the people who had donated $500 or more to any of my crowdfunding campaigns. So, and I also had a very clear revenue stream. So as long as you also know what your revenue stream is and you can explain to investors that they will potentially get their money back, I think that's important. And I did email, I went back into a whole bunch of lesbian films. I went to their producer list and I created a list of who they all were, and I cold emailed them and or sent a message through social media. So I used IMDb Pro. So if you're not a IMDb Pro user, I would highly suggest investing in that. That didn't return a bunch of money, but it got me on the radar of some people. So you never know down the line. But I found really good luck with crowdfunding. If you haven't done crowdfunding, I would definitely encourage that as well.
Thank you very much. And I hear you did your homework and you worked very strategically. That's obvious. So what's your favorite, good question directly on this. What's your favorite crowdfunding app?
There's a lot of crowdfunding apps. I prefer Indiegogo because that's the one I used like from the beginning. So I really stuck with it. I find it to be what I like about it is that it's you can do an all or nothing. So with Kickstarter, it's all or nothing, but with Indiegogo, there's flexible funding and all or nothing. So you can pick, which I really, really like. Okay. I know there's another big one called Seed and Spark. I find that one a little confusing as far as like the way they do the perks. But I do know that if you use them, they have a distribution channel that you could potentially use. I don't know the nuances of that, but it's definitely something to look into. But like I said, I prefer Indiegogo, but it's also just the one that I've used every time. So I can go back to my old Indiegogo campaigns and I can message people, hey, I'm doing a new crowdfunding campaign. Here's the link to it. Or you can always download who had donated to you in the past.
Okay, very good advices. And now we have a question from Natasha Bruce. Hi, Christine and Helen. What do you recommend for schooling to be considered a legit writer? I'm an actor and published co-author, but never attempted a script before. And Natasha is in Vancouver, Canada. And Erin, by the way, was from Seattle. I can see that.
Seattle. Okay. Hi, Erin. Yeah. You have some deep pockets in Seattle, Erin. See what you can do up there. So let's see here. Screenwriter. There's a really good book called is it Save the Cat? There's this first try screenwriting book. I think it's called Save the Cat. Someone can probably throw it in the chat box. So I would, if you want to write, I read that book. There's probably some online courses that you could take. Understand formatting, that's very important. And again, I think one of the most important things you can do is find 4 movies that you like. Yes, that's the right title. Thank you so much, Lori. Find movies that you like and read the scripts, because that will give you an idea of formatting, which is really important, and how their writing style and what they did, how they described things. So I just think the more scripts you can read, the better. That's just as good of an education as going to a screenwriting school. So I would read Save the Cat, find 4 movies that you love and read the scripts, and then just read as many scripts as you can, and just start writing. There's, I think, a free program you can get online so that you don't have to invest in something like Final Draft that can get the formatting right. Do not use Word document and use the script writing format in it. It is not correct, and it jumbles my eyes whenever people send me one of those. So go online and find the whatever the free version. There's a free version of something that you can utilize. But the formatting is very important. And then write.
Practice in
Highland is good for Mac users. Thank you, Kara.
Oh, that's
there you go. So there's some stuff in the chat that people are starting to put in there.
Yeah, I found a question here. When is Christmas at the Ranch coming out? Shalonda Dan asked that in the chat.
So that's going to be sometime this holiday season. I don't know exactly when. So we're in post right now, and we have a couple of networks that want to see our fine cut. So we'll be shopping it around probably like July, August, and then we'll know where it will be. Wherever we always try and do international on Tello, unless it's someone gives us a lot of money for a worldwide deal.
Thank you for that answer. And then someone asked, how difficult was it to get Lindsay Wagner? Wagner.
I know, right? You know, I have a really great casting director. Here's I'll just sort of, this would never come up in an interview, so I'll give everyone just this little thing. I believe in a production goddess. I have a production goddess who helps me in casting and writing and in filming, and she's there's so many things that can go wrong when you're in the process of making a movie, and that when sometimes things go wrong and something else happens, that's your production goddess letting you know that you went on a wrong path, and then she's correcting it. So I'll answer the Lindsay Wagner question, but then I'll give another I'll give another story about my production goddess. So what happened was hang on just a second, I'm so sorry. We were going out for Mima, and we had a list of actresses who had submitted to us. So we did a posting, and my casting director had a list of actresses, and we started going down the actresses. And we had reached out to someone's agent, and they were like, well, she's not available, but what about Lindsay Wagner? And like immediately I was like, oh my God, really? So Lindsay wasn't on our list. They hadn't submitted. We don't know why. COVID was a big thing. So some people weren't working. So even though their agent submitted, they had said no because they didn't want to work during COVID. And as soon as they mentioned Lindsay, I was like, that's it. Like, that's her. And so that happened. And that happened with Amanda Rigetti, who we got as well. We were going out and making offers and sending the script to actresses. And someone's manager said, well, so-and-so is declined, but I have Amanda Rigetti. And we were like, oh my gosh. So, you know, you just, you know, you post it, and then you cross your fingers, and your production goddess like blesses you with the person who you're supposed to have.
Fantastic stuff. Did you have another production goddess story?
Yes. So this is an example of this. I'll try and make it as succinct as possible. I meditate every day. I truly believe in meditation. And so I was meditating, and I was casting this role. There's a character called Masonry, and I was that voice who is my production goddess, while I was meditating, said, you need to cast someone from Season of Love, which is our first movie. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And one of my actresses' face literally came across my inside mind, but her face was turned away from me. So I was like, well, it's not that one. then another actress popped into my head and her face was looking at me, and I was like, okay, well, it has to be this actress. So I immediately, who my casting director knows, so I texted I texted her and I said, Laura needs to be Masonry. Now, we had already cast Dia Frampton as our lead Haley, and Dia is half Asian, and so her brother we needed to cast as an Asian actor as well. So we had already found our actor. So we have Dia and we have Laura, who's also half Asian. And so I was like, well, it's kind of unconventional to have, you know, so many Asians in a thing, but you know, it doesn't matter, right? My production goddess told me it was Laura. 2 days before production started, Dia was supposed to get on a plane and she tested positive for COVID.
Wow.
So she was gone. Like, there was nothing we could do. And it just so happens that Laura was getting on the plane 2 days earlier, and Laura is half Asian.
Wow.
So she fit perfectly to move from Masonry to Haley. And if I hadn't done that, I would have been up a creek. So my production goddess worked her magic and was like, it's not supposed to be Dia, it's supposed to be Laura. You didn't know that. I knew that. So this is what I did to tell you to cast Laura as Masonry so she could really be Haley. Because there is no way I would have cast anyone but Dia in my movie at that point. Like, I wouldn't have gotten rid of her unless she had COVID. So it was just this crazy instance where my production goddess was just like, I'm going to help you out. I don't know why. I have no clue, but and we did end up casting Dia in a smaller role, so she is in the movie. But it's just one of those things where I was like, this is insane.
I'm so happy you're sharing this, but don't you think, because of course there are a lot of things that we don't know, and there are so much in our unconscious that you now, and you'd say what you do when you meditate, you actually go into yourself and search for your unconscious to help you in your conscious. So I think it totally makes sense, and I'm so happy you share this, because you know, I think we need that to continue. As I said, we are a global tribe, and we need this hope, gives us hope to continue to create. So someone else, what can I do to create? And I think, find your goddess.
Find your production goddess. She is there and she is powerful.
That's really cool. I have a question from my dear friend from Switzerland, Gabriel Bauer, who is one of the presidents for Swan Network. Hi, Helen, great webinar. Thanks also to Christine. Concerning Down to Earth and financing, we are just constructing newly our streaming page. What does Christine recommend instead of PayPal? Best from Gabriel Bauer in Switzerland.
Oh gosh, we use Stripe, and I have found them to be a good processor, and they will also share data. The other one that we used earlier was called TSYS, TSYS, but Stripe I found Stripe to be very good, so I would use them.
Thank you very much. That was a technical question, which I totally appreciate. I think we have run through all. Let me have a look in the chat field before we have 2 minutes left. So see if there is anything else. Blah, 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 blah. How many of us had major by women? We love Lindsay. Thank you. Highland. Yeah, I think that was also. Final question from my side then. A future dream project. Okay, now that came. Who is the most important person on your crew? That's a good question.
Sound.
You should say yourself.
No, sound.
Sound.
If you don't have good sound.
Okay, tell us, why is the sound the most important?
You can do a lot of things. You can do a lot of things to help sound in post-production, but people will forgive you some shaky or shoddy camera. They will not forgive you for sound.
Yeah.
If you look at the Blair Witch Project, I think that's the example I use all the time. That has some of the worst, most horrendous camera work on the planet. Yeah. Especially, the movies like Paranormal Activity that have the cameras coming from the green. We will forgive bad camera. We will not forgive bad sound. Nothing makes your production look low budget, like bad sound.
That's really interesting. Sound is the unsung heroine of our industry, goddess and sound. And actually, I don't know if you know about the Danish Dogma series.
I know about Dogma. Yeah.
They took away the light and they simplify the camera work, but they never, ever.
They don't have any rules around sound, do they?
No. The sound was better than ever. So I think sound is goddess. Thank you very much, Christine. It's been such a joy.
Thank you, Helene. Thank you, WIFTI.
Yeah.
It's been lovely.
And for you, we will not have a WIFTI Worldwide webinar in July because we will have some summer vacation. But the plan is to have another one in end of August. And we now are trying to set up our own WIFTI history. So hopefully we will meet some women who were among the pioneers creating WIFTI. So much love to you.
I also want to say happy Pride to everyone. Thank you so much for talking about this during Pride. So thank you.
Love you all. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.